Well, hi, I'm Scott. I'm one of the pastors here at Marco Presbyterian Church, and we're so grateful that you've landed here. We intend for this content to be used in conjunction with a local church that you belong to so that you might grow in the Lord. If you're not connected to a church, please connect here to Marco Presbyterian Church, and if you're blessed by this content, consider giving to Marco Church. We love you, and we want you to be blessed. We hope that this brings hope to your heart.
I invite you to take your Bibles and find 2 Samuel. And if you're like me, I sometimes need to use my table of contents to find this book, but it's worth finding. There are Bibles under your seats if you want to grab one. 2 Samuel chapter 9. I want to tell you a story today, one of the greatest stories in the Bible. 2 Samuel chapter 9. Because this is God's holy word, we stand in honor of it. Thank you. I read to you the first 13 verses of 2 Samuel chapter 9. Let's hear God's word. And David said, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba. And they called him to David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God to him?" Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He's crippled in his feet." The king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "He is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lo-debar." Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lo-debar. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David, fell on his face, paid homage, and David said, "Mephibosheth." And he answered, "Behold, I am your servant." And David said to him, "Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always." And he paid homage and said, "What is your servant, that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I?" Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, "All that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson, and you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him, and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "According to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so will your servant do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both of his feet. May God add his blessing to this reading of his holy word. You may be seated. Stories. Stories have a wonderful way of communicating truth. That's why your Bible is jam-packed with stories from cover to cover. Real people just like you and me, in real places. Stories chosen by the Holy Spirit and inserted in the holy Word of God, so that when you and I wake up in the morning, we know how to do life. And so what I'm bringing you this morning, at least in my opinion, if you don't mind me saying, is a story that ranks as one of the best stories, and for me, one of my personal favorites. Our story begins, as you can see in verse 1, with a well-known person named David. People inside and outside of the church have heard of David. David's the author of Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." David, the slayer of Goliath. David, the king of Jerusalem. David, who had a dark side as well. A man who ordered the murder of one of his military officers to cover up his adultery, which is such a reminder to all of us in this room that all of us need grace because we all have a dark side. As we move into our story, David as king, though, asks the unexpected question. In verse 1, he asks, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul?" Now, who was Saul? His enemy. His prime enemy. Much of Samuel is written about the battle between these two men. But what does he say? "I'd like to show some kindness for Jonathan's sake to the family of Saul." Now, the theme of this series that Scott and I want to bring to you is LLJ, Love Like Jesus. You're going to have that memorized in a few weeks. Love like Jesus. And so, when we decided to do this series, I asked myself, well, where am I going to find a story that's going to illustrate this? And my mind went to 2 Samuel 9. Because I think we have here a story of a man who took the initiative to do that which is contrary to the culture and show kindness to an enemy. So, can I invite you to sit back and enjoy a story? Our setting is about the 10th century BC. Normally, to solidify a new administration's position, the old regime would be dismissed, if not wiped out, so that there were no potential threats to the new king. And so David's question in verse 1 about an enemy's family member is so contrary to what would have been done in the time. It's countercultural, which is what the gospel is. The gospel is countercultural at every turn. It would be comparable to Mr. Biden phoning Mr. Trump and say, "Is there anybody in your family that I could show a bit of kindness to?" It would be comparable to Mr. Trump phoning the Obama family and say, "Is there anybody that I could show a little personal kindness to?" That's what we've got here. The unexpected, if I could say that. Now, this question of verse 1 is especially contrary to culture when you remember from your knowledge of the Old Testament that Saul was enemy number one. The last person you would think to show kindness to, especially knowing that Saul and his family treated David terribly. You would think revenge would be the action. And what we have is, I'd like to show some kindness. Now, why? Well, simply because David is a man who had come to understand the undeserved kindness of God. So he wants to show it. That's all he is doing. He's driven to show kindness. Now, if you mark things in your Bible, you might want to mark 3 times the word kindness shows up. Verse 1 is the first one. It's again in verse 3. Kindness becomes then, it rises as the primary thread of this true story, because that's what we are to see. And so here's the backstory of that question, the question there in verse 1. David and Saul's son, Jonathan, were best buddies. They were just good friends. And so they had developed, at David's initiative, a covenant, which is just a binding agreement. They had produced this covenant between themselves, and so for Jonathan's sake, his friend's sake, David does not follow conventional practices and wipe out the previous royal family. Rather, he wants to show mercy. He wants to show mercy to those who were his enemies. So a search is made, and you could sort of tell the plot as I read. And sure enough, there are surviving members of Saul's family. Even though Saul is dead and Jonathan is dead, there are still some surviving families. So they bring this guy named Ziba into David's court. Ziba had worked for King Saul. And how do you like that name, Ziba? I mean, we got school teachers here this morning. You remember what school teachers did to us when we were little? We had to line up alphabetically, A to Z. I'm an S. I love that. I was sort of toward the end hoping that nothing would happen to me. But Ziba, I mean, that'd be a great name. You'd never get called on to do anything. Well, here comes Ziba, escorted into the king's presence. How do you think he was feeling? Shaking in his boots. He figured he was being summoned to his death, because that's what normally would happen. And so the guy's smart enough to be diplomatic and just rolls up, and David says, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I'm your servant." He's just hoping he can not lose his head on this particular occasion. So surprise of surprise, David asks him this question, verse 3. I got to read it because it's so powerful. David, sitting on his throne, looks at Ziba, and he says, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul," watch the language, "that I may show the kindness of God to him?" So to abbreviate the story, it turns out, sure enough, there's still a living relative of Saul, and his grandson, Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson, still living. But he's not just a grandson, is he? He's a prince. He's an heir to the throne. He's a threat, potentially. His name is Mephibosheth. How do you like that? Say that 5 times fast and see how you do. It's quite a name. But this is Mephibosheth, the prince, Prince Mephibosheth, who gets hauled in now to meet King David. How was he feeling? If Ziba was shaking in his boots, this guy's trembling. So he follows Ziba's pattern and says, "I'm your servant." David was sensitive enough to sense the fear in this guy. So he opens up his sentence as he's addressing Mephibosheth, and he says, "Do not fear. I'm going to show you kindness. And here's why. Because I entered into a binding covenant, a binding agreement with your dad. And I'm going to keep my word, no matter what. Even though your family treated me terribly." Mephibosheth cannot believe his ears. So much so that he makes that classic statement in verse 8. He's down on his knees, he's paying homage to a king, and he says, "What is your servant," verse 8, "that you should show regard for a dead dog as me?" Now, to really appreciate the power of this story, we need to think together about David's table. If kindness shows up as a word 3 times in our text, table shows up 4 times in our text. So if you get your neon highlighter out, hit kindness 3, hit table 4. And every time you get to that page in your Bible, you say, "Oh yeah, I got this story." So this is amazing because this table is not just any hunk of wood with 4 legs. This is David's table. This is a royal table. Think state dining room of the White House. Think dining room in the Kremlin. Think dining room of Buckingham Palace. You get the picture. Powerful generals and advisors, politicians put their feet under this royal tablecloth. Servants don't sit there. Common citizens aren't sitting there. In fact, verse 11 hit me because David's sons sit at that table. This is a royal table, the royal family, and the highest people in Jerusalem. Best cuts of meat, freshest of food, finest preparations, presentation would be perfect. Anyone who sat at this table was favored. And who gets invited? Mephibosheth. Who? A relative of Saul, a prince of David's previous enemy? Are you kidding? How in the world did he get to pull up a chair to this table? Now don't miss the facts. Mephibosheth has lost everything. He's lost his grandfather Saul, he's lost his dad Jonathan, and the members of this dynasty, they got nothing. Mephibosheth personally would have lost family, wealth, land, position, privilege, and of course, the potential of ever rising to the throne. But don't miss the details, because he lost something else. Did you see it twice? He's disabled. He's lame in both feet. It says so twice. Now, how did that happen, you might ask? Well, I love it that the Bible has all these details in it. The story goes that when Saul's dynasty was falling apart and he was running, fleeing the royal house, Mephibosheth's nurse picks up 5-year-old Mephibosheth, and she hauls out of there and trips on the door sill or something and drops this poor boy. And he's now crippled. He's lame in both feet. So here's a young man, Mephibosheth, who wasn't even born when David and Jonathan made that covenant. He wasn't even born. That covenant was crafted, and now, seemingly out of the blue, he gets elevated to the point where he gets to roll up his wheelchair and place his crippled feet under the tablecloth of none other than the king of God's people. It doesn't get any better than this. He got to enjoy the royal roast beef. He got the royal wine. He enjoyed the delicacies of a table he did not work for. He didn't deserve. He didn't even seek after. David did what? David sought him out and invited him to the bounty of the table. I ask you, is the story working yet? Are you putting 2 and 2 together? Or are you daydreaming and planning your afternoon and looking at your watch? You need to be putting 2 and 2 together. Here was a man broken. He had no life, he had no future, and now he gets to drive up to the royal palace, park in a disabled parking place closest to the front door, and get seated at the king's bountiful table. Are you finding yourself yet? If I see you in the lobby this morning, I might walk up and say, "Good morning, Mephibosheth." Every one of you, including the guy up here, that's who we are. Are you making the connection? So let's listen into the table conversations. Mephibosheth arrives. Powerful men are assembling. Powerful, beautiful women are moving toward the table. Servants are helping people with their chairs. Food covering every inch of this vast table. Generals, advisors, special guests, everyone stands. Well, almost everyone. David enters this room with all the pomp and ceremony of any king of the day. Now, Mephibosheth isn't sitting there saying, "Man, look at what I did to deserve this. It's about time." He didn't say, I ought to be at this table. I've paid my dues. It's time for me to be here. I've achieved every honor, so I've got a right to be at this table. That doesn't even cross his mind. He's sitting there saying, how in the world did I get here? How did I get to sit at this table? I don't deserve this. How did I get to be a guest at the king's table? You see, if he could stand, he can't, he'd stand to honor this one who's been so gracious to him. But he can't. And like us, like every one of us in this room, we are spiritually crippled, helpless, and hopeless. Listen to this song. How sweet yet frightful is the place, with Christ within the doors, while everlasting love displays the choicest of his stores. While all our hearts and all our songs join to admire the feast, each of us cry with thankful tongues, Lord, why was I a guest? Why was I made to hear your voice and enter while there's room? When thousands make a wretched choice and rather starve than come. 'Twas the same love that spread the feast that sweetly drew us in, else we had still refused to taste and perished in our sin. Pity the nations, O our God, constrain the earth to come. Send your victorious word abroad and bring the strangers home. We long to see your churches full, that all the chosen race may with one voice and heart and soul sing your redeeming grace. Do you know why you are loved by God? Do you know? Do you know why you are currently receiving His love and His protection and His tenderness and His favor? It has nothing, absolutely nothing, to do with what you've done in your life. It has nothing to do with where you were born, what charities you've given to, what good things you've done, what successes you have under your belt. Nothing. But I've not made myself clear. So I'm going to use this word, zero. That's how much it has to do with you. It has everything to do with God's decision to make a covenant, like David and Jonathan did, to make a binding commitment to keep a promise. It has nothing to do with you and everything to do with God's freedom to be gracious to whom He chooses to be gracious. I mean, David made this promise to Jonathan, probably not realizing what it might cost him. And now he has to follow through. Jesus loves those that His Father gave to Him, and He loves them to the very end. And you and I get to sit at the Lord's table, which is 100 times better than David's table, I tell you that. And one day we're going to sit at Jesus' table in the new earth. There's no dining room, there's no table on earth that comes close to what that table will be like. Because can you imagine what that day is going to be like? We're going to come to the palace of our King. We're going to drive in there, we're going to park in one of the disabled parking spaces. One of the parking spaces for the morally disabled, the emotionally broken, the mentally hurt, the physically broken, crippled, and helpless sinners, as we all are. And the doors are going to open to that palace. And Jesus is going to invite you to sit at His table. And you and I are going to be sitting at that table. We might look up toward the Lord Jesus and say, how did I get here? And I'm going to be sitting there. And I'm going to see some of you. And I might lean over the table and say, how in the world did you get here? Only for you who know me well, too well, are going to look across the table and say, Shoof, how did you get here? That's what that table is going to be like. You see, Jesus is so immensely good to us in the gospel of the cross. We who have received more kindness and mercy than we'll ever deserve can now ask the question of verse 1. Who should I demonstrate such kindness to? Who? I mean, all David did was share the kindness that God had shown to him. And don't ever forget, David was a murderer and an adulterer. And you would think he would say, man, I can't, I'm going to sit in the back room. I've made a mess of my life. You see, your past doesn't control your present. And your present doesn't control your future. And it didn't control David's present, so that he invited this guy and he showed him mercy. In other words, you, my friends, can be loved and then love like Jesus. You see, His kindness exceeds our expectations. You and I are welcome at His royal table of grace. We don't deserve to put our feet under that table and we don't deserve to put our feet under the big table that we're going to be seated at one day. But Jesus qualifies us to do so. So I'm asking you, are you hearing this story deep in your heart? I'm not just asking about the gray matter here. I'm asking, has that story filtered down and come into your heart? You see, our culture is addicted to the idea that we work to achieve what we want, and we deserve what we get, and we're right, and we're better than anybody else, and so we can look down on others, so we divide ourselves up in all these little groups, and based on pride of position and prejudice and self-righteousness, and the church is not free of any of this. We gossip and criticize and separate, boast of our opinions, and this story comes right out of God's holy word, and it blasts to pieces everything in our culture that is wrong, like those things. Can you hear God say, I love you, and I will always love you, not because you are worthy in any way of my love, but because I made a covenant with my Son to love you. You see, everything you have received from God is purely out of His riches and His kindness. God our Father showers us with the bounty of His table. And then, as verse 11 suggests, God then adopts you legally into His family so that you are a son and a daughter sitting with Mephibosheth around that table. Wouldn't it be great to look down the end of the table and see Mephibosheth sitting there? He's getting us ready for this table and that table. Thank you, Mephibosheth. This means that our hope is placed in Jesus' invitation to the table, His kindness in even inviting us, and the bounty that we're going to experience on that table. So if your heart is hearing this story, you're going to wake up every day and you're going to say, I wonder who I could show the kindness of God to as God has shown His kindness to me. You're going to wake up in the morning and you're going to say, I've been loved by Jesus. And now I want to love like Jesus, LLJ. Every one of you is Mephibosheth. I'm sorry if that offends you, but you may come up in the lobby and address me. Hello, Steve. I mean, hello, Mephibosheth, because I'm in the same boat. And he got to come and dine with the King of Kings. And so I invite you to come to Jesus' table and then go out and find anyone you can and show them the kindness that's like Jesus, and then invite them to come and sit at the table with you. So to wrap it up, two things. Your faith and your assurance, both your faith and your sense of assurance resides in the invitation Jesus has given, in the kindness that has motivated that invitation, and in the bounty that will be there from King Jesus. Secondly, your mission now, my friends, is to ask, who, Holy Spirit, show me, who can I invite to enjoy the kindness and bounty of my King? Let's pray. Lord, thank you for inserting this fabulous story in the canon of Holy Scripture, so that on April the 11th, 2021, we could let this touch our lives. Holy Spirit, truly touch our lives, that we would be changed by the gospel. In Jesus' name.